I found out about the wedding the way you'd expect, through a photo on social media. My own daughter, the little girl who used to chase me around the kitchen, was standing in a chapel in Key West, smiling in a dress I didn't help pick, surrounded by people I didn't know, and not a single word had reached me. My chest tightened, a bitter taste rising in my mouth. I kept staring at the screen, scrolling through pictures, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. I wasn't the kind of father who threw tantrums or called the police over invitations. I prided myself on staying calm, being measured, but there was a storm behind my eyes. A storm that had been building for years, simmering in quiet moments she didn't notice. The fact that she hadn't invited me to her wedding wasn't just an oversight. It was a declaration. I left my phone on the counter and went outside. The salty air from my balcony overlooking the Atlantic hit my face, and I inhaled, letting it soak into my lungs. The beach house, the one I'd worked my fingers to the bone to buy, sparkled in the late afternoon sun. For a fleeting second, I imagined her and her new husband walking up to it, thinking it was theirs for the honeymoon. That would have been the final insult. I closed my eyes and made a decision. If she thought she could erase me from her big day, I would remind her that I still had power in this story. She wanted a honeymoon at my house? Fine, she could have it, but not the way she expected. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid warm against my hand, and I smiled. Not the happy smile of a proud father, but the kind of smile that carries a quiet, deliberate reckoning. I spent the night pacing my living room, bourbon in hand, the soft hum of the ceiling fan above like a metronome keeping time with my racing thoughts. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that made every creak in the floorboard feel like a scream. I poured another drink and stared out the sliding glass doors at the moonlit waves. The ocean's rhythm, steady and relentless, mirrored the pulse in my veins. I couldn't let this go. Not this time. The next morning, I woke with a plan. I didn't have to confront her directly. She had already shown me what she thought of me. No, my message had to be more subtle, more unforgettable. I went into my office, dug out the old files of house rules, cleaning services, and the guest calendar. Every detail mattered. I would turn her dream honeymoon into a test, a reminder that I was still the man who had built everything around us. I started with the house itself. I hired new staff under the guise of maintenance checks, people she wouldn't recognize. The house would be ready, pristine, but not easy. I programmed the locks to require codes I would control, set up reminders for every appliance and alarm, and even arranged the beach chairs so that the perfect sunset photo required patience. Every little thing was a tiny assertion of control, a whisper in the air that said, "This is still my domain." By the time she called me, it was late afternoon. Her voice was hesitant, the sort of carefully polite tone she used when she was trying to hide frustration. "Dad, we were thinking about coming down for the honeymoon at your place. We thought it would be nice." "Of course," I said smoothly, hiding the smile that threatened to escape. "I'd love to have you here. Let's make sure the house is ready. You know, the usual. Rules, schedules, all that fun stuff." There was a pause, a subtle flicker of irritation I could hear in her voice. Okay, Dad. We'll follow the rules." I hung up and felt a strange warmth of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge in the childish sense. It was about setting boundaries, showing her that absence didn't erase me. I spent the next few days preparing like a general planning a campaign. Towels were folded perfectly, beds made just so, a welcome basket of fruits and wines that required her to navigate the kitchen carefully to find them. Even the thermostat had a schedule she couldn't override. Every little thing was a reminder that I had thought ahead, and she was stepping into my world. When they arrived, the tension was immediate. Her husband looked around like a man unsure of whether he had just walked into paradise or a trap. My daughter, beautiful in her honeymoon glow, didn't smile at first. She took in the house, the carefully staged perfection, and then the rules I handed her in an envelope. Everything from garbage pickup to pool cleaning times, everything written in my neat, precise handwriting. "This is a lot," she muttered. "It's just my way," I said, keeping my voice calm, almost gentle. "I want you to have a good stay, but I also want you to understand that this house, It's been my world for a long time. Respect it, and it respects you. There were awkward moments in those first hours. She tried to bypass the codes, to adjust the thermostat, to move chairs for a better photo angle, but every step required a small interaction with me. Every time she hesitated, I reminded her subtly, guiding without harshness, letting her feel the invisible lines I had drawn. And then came the beach. I watched them from the deck, the sand cool beneath my bare feet. She tried to pull her husband toward the perfect sunset spot, but the chairs were arranged to make it slightly inconvenient. I wasn't cruel, but I wanted her to understand that privilege wasn't given. It was noticed. When she finally adjusted the chairs, I called her over to show her something. An old photo of us at the same beach when she was 6, building a sandcastle that had collapsed under the tide. Her expression softened for a moment, and I knew she remembered. That flicker of memory was enough to remind her that I had always been here, even when she had forgotten. By the end of the first evening, the tension had shifted. She started to laugh quietly at the quirks I had set up. The way the kitchen timer beeped at inconvenient moments, the towels folded into strange shapes, the locked cabinets that required thought to open. It wasn't a victory in the traditional sense, but a reclamation of my presence. I didn't say much. I let the house speak. I let her realize that she couldn't erase me, no matter how much she tried. That night I sat alone on the balcony again, the ocean's whisper filling the spaces between my thoughts. I didn't feel triumphant exactly, but I felt steady, powerful in a quiet way. I had shown her boundaries, reminded her that family was not something to be ignored, and that respect was a two-way street. My daughter might have tried to sideline me, but I had made my mark on her honeymoon without a word of confrontation. And as the moonlight danced across the water, I realized that this was more than a lesson for her. It was a lesson for me, too. I could be present, firm, and unwavering, even when the world tried to push me aside. The storm had passed, leaving a calm that tasted like the ocean's salt on my tongue. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself smile. By the second morning, the honeymoon had become a delicate dance. I watched them from the kitchen window as they tiptoed through the house, eyes darting toward signs, timers, and locks, like intruders in a place that belonged to someone else. I poured my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, the bitter warmth filling my mouth. There was satisfaction in knowing that my presence, even unspoken, dominated the space. Breakfast was quiet. My daughter tried to make small talk, asking about the garden, the kitchen renovations, the books on the shelves. I answered politely, but every sentence carried a subtle weight, a reminder that she hadn't included me in her wedding, but she couldn't exclude me from her life entirely. Her husband cleared his throat, glancing at me as if seeking approval, and I simply nodded. No hostility, no softness, just presence. After breakfast, they decided to walk the beach. I followed at a distance, not to intrude, but to ensure that the rules were respected. The sand was cool beneath my shoes, the waves hissing at the shore in a steady rhythm. She reached for a driftwood log to sit on, and I subtly steered her toward a sturdier spot, letting her stumble slightly before catching herself. A small, controlled lesson. Life, like my house, demanded awareness and respect. Hours passed. I observed them interact, noticed the way she smiled at him, the small touches, the whispered words. My heart twisted, a strange mix of pride and frustration. She was happy, and I wanted her to be happy, but not at the cost of erasing me. Not when I had poured decades into raising her, guiding her, even when she hadn't realized it. Later, I introduced a new surprise to the house. The pool filter had been programmed to release jets of water at unexpected intervals. The jacuzzi had a slightly unusual timing, and the outdoor lighting followed an unconventional schedule. I called it enhancing the experience. They laughed nervously at first, uncertain whether it was part of the honeymoon magic or my quiet protest. When she confronted me about it that evening, her voice shook with exasperation. "Dad, what is going on with this place? Everything keeps moving, changing. It's like we can't do anything." I smiled, leaning against the doorway. "It's a house with rules. Rules keep things in order. Rules keep people safe. Rules make sure no one takes what they shouldn't." I let the words hang in the air, a subtle reminder of her oversight, of the wedding I hadn't attended. Her husband frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "We just wanted a quiet honeymoon, that's all." "And you'll have it," I said softly. "Quiet, orderly, but with respect." That night, I sat on the deck, listening to the ocean, letting the wind whip through my hair. My daughter emerged, barefoot, the sand cool against her skin. She sat beside me, hesitant, arms wrapped around her knees. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think. It wasn't personal." I looked at her, really looked, the soft moonlight catching the edges of her face. "It was personal," I said simply. "Family is always personal. When you leave someone out, whether you mean to or not, it cuts deeper than you think." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am." I didn't say anything for a long moment. The waves crashed rhythmically, the wind carrying the smell of salt and the faint scent of her perfume. It was quiet, serene, and full of tension all at once. Finally, I spoke. "Apology accepted, but you'll remember this lesson for a long time. Not just because I made the house difficult, but because I want you to understand that being part of a family is about respect, attention, and acknowledgement. You can't skip steps and expect the foundation to hold." She leaned her head against my shoulder, silent. Her husband watched from a distance. Respect mingled with relief in his expression. For the first time since they arrived, the tension softened, transformed into something more mutual. A tentative truce built on understanding rather than rebellion. I stayed out on the deck long after they went inside, the night sky vast above me, stars scattered like diamonds. I realized then that this wasn't just about a wedding, a missed invitation, or even a canceled honeymoon. It was about presence, about showing up, and about asserting the quiet, unshakable authority of a father who refused to be erased. By the time the waves lapped against the shore, I knew the story had shifted. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't humiliated, and yet, in a subtle, deliberate way, I had reminded her, and myself, of the bond that no photo, no wedding, no distance could ever undo. The morning after our quiet, uneasy truce, I woke early, the sun barely brushing the horizon. The house was still, but I could feel the energy shifting. My daughter and her husband were downstairs, probably arguing quietly about the rules I had set. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, the warmth grounding me, and walked barefoot across the cool, hardwood floors. Each step reminded me that this was my domain, my beach house, my ground to reclaim. Not with anger, but with presence. I decided to introduce a subtle twist to their honeymoon, something that would test patience, teamwork, and, most importantly, respect. I rearranged the kitchen schedule, leaving notes in my handwriting about when certain appliances could be used, how the dishwasher worked, and even when the blender could safely be turned on without setting off the timer alarms. I knew it was petty in the eyes of some, but in my mind, it was poetic justice. Every detail reminded them that they weren't in total control, and that some things required attention, care, and, yes, respect. By mid-morning, my daughter appeared in the doorway, rubbing her temples. "Dad? Seriously, the coffee maker isn't working right. The blender is—" She stopped, exhaling sharply. "I don't know why we can't just have a normal morning." I leaned against the door frame, calm, my voice steady. "Normal mornings are earned. This house doesn't run itself. You don't run it by ignoring its rhythm." Her husband muttered something under his breath about control freaks, and I let it slide. He was learning the rules the hard way. I watched as they tried to follow the instructions, each small failure met with polite corrections from me. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to make threats. Their frustration, their struggle to navigate my house, was enough. It was a reminder that respect is more than words. It's action. By noon, I noticed a subtle change. My daughter's posture shifted. Her movements became more deliberate. She paused before touching things, read instructions more carefully, and even smiled at the small victories. Figuring out the coffee maker without setting off the alarm, unlocking the code to the pool gate correctly. It wasn't surrender, but acknowledgement. The afternoon brought the real test. The beach. I suggested a walk along the rocks at the edge of the shore, where the tide shifted unpredictably and the waves could be dangerous if you weren't careful. She hesitated, then glanced at her husband, and together they followed. I stayed behind, keeping a watchful eye, letting them navigate the uneven path, the wind whipping at their clothes, the sand giving way beneath their feet. I didn't intervene unless it was necessary, letting them realize that attention and caution mattered in the world, not just at home, but anywhere. As they reached a small outcrop, I called out, "Careful with the tide. It moves faster than you think." My voice carried over the waves, steady, unyielding. She nodded, her hair whipping across her face, a brief look of respect in her eyes. That single moment told me that my lessons weren't lost. Later, back at the house, we had dinner together on the deck. The sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. I set the plates down carefully, noticing how they handled the utensils, how they moved around each other. The tension had softened into something else, an acknowledgement of boundaries, of presence, and of the fact that the house, and by extension I, mattered. My daughter finally spoke, quietly, almost reverently. "Dad, I get it now. I didn't mean to shut you out, but I see that this house, it's a part of you, and maybe I needed to see it the way it really is. Not just think of it as somewhere to have a honeymoon." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "It's more than a house. It's history, it's effort. It's the sum of choices and care. You can't step into it without acknowledging that." Her husband finally smiled, a small, real smile. "I think I get it too. This place, it demands respect, and maybe we've learned that the hard way." That night, after they went inside, I sat alone on the balcony again. The ocean stretched infinitely before me, the salt wind brushing my face, the stars sharp and cold above. I realized then that this wasn't about punishment or revenge anymore. It was about presence, about claiming the space you've built with your hands and teaching those you love that love without respect is empty. I sipped my bourbon, letting the warmth fill me, and felt something rare, contentment. I had made my point without cruelty, guided without force, and reminded my daughter that she couldn't erase me, even if she wanted to. The storm of anger that had boiled inside me for weeks was settling, replaced by a quiet power. I had won, not through confrontation, but through presence, through careful orchestration, and through the unspoken truth that respect is earned, never demanded. As the waves whispered against the shore, I smiled, knowing the next chapter of this story, the real reconciliation, was only beginning. The lessons had been learned, and the bridge, however tentative, had been rebuilt, and I knew that when morning came again, we would move forward, not as adversaries, but as father and daughter, finally, fully, and irrevocably. The next morning, I woke to the smell of salt air mixed with burnt toast drifting from the kitchen. My daughter had taken the lead on breakfast, attempting to navigate the coffee maker and toaster without triggering the timers I had carefully programmed. I watched silently from the balcony as she fumbled with the appliances, her husband hovering nervously behind her. The sight made a small, satisfying smile creep across my face. Patience was being tested, lessons quietly reinforced. When they finally sat down at the table, there was an unspoken truce in the air, but it was fragile. My daughter's fingers drummed nervously against the countertop, eyes flicking to me occasionally, as if seeking permission or reassurance. I poured my coffee slowly, letting the warmth seep into my hands, feeling the weight of authority in the silence. I had learned long ago that presence is louder than words. "You've really changed things around here," she said finally, her voice tentative. "It's different, harder than I expected. Change isn't always comfortable," I replied evenly, "but discomfort teaches awareness. Awareness keeps things intact. That's what respect looks like in action." Her husband muttered, "It's like a boot camp for the honeymoon." I let the remark slide, savoring the subtle tension it created. They were starting to understand that this wasn't a game. Every rule, every timer, every locked cabinet was a boundary I had set, not out of malice, but as a lesson about attention, care, and acknowledgement. After breakfast, I suggested a walk to the dunes behind the house. The path was uneven, the sand shifting unpredictably beneath their feet. the sun bright enough to burn if they weren't careful. I followed behind, keeping a measured distance, watching their movements, the way they navigated obstacles together. My daughter's hand brushed against a cactus at one point, and I called out a warning before she could get pricked. She froze, then nodded, the subtle acknowledgement of my presence and guidance clear in her eyes. As we reached the top of the dune overlooking the ocean, the wind whipped through our clothes, tangling hair across faces. My daughter turned to me, eyes wide and reflective. I didn't realize this house, this place, it's more than just walls and furniture. It's history, Dad. It's you. I nodded slowly, feeling a lump in my throat. It's the sum of choices, effort, and care. You can't walk into it lightly. You have to move deliberately, pay attention, and respect it, or it'll remind you of your mistakes. Her husband finally caught up, sweat on his brow, hands brushing sand off his pants. I think I get it now, he said quietly. This isn't about rules for the sake of rules. It's awareness, responsibility. I allowed a small, satisfied smile to break across my face. The lesson was sinking in. The storm of anger and resentment that had boiled inside me since the wedding was slowly dissipating. I was reclaiming presence, not through confrontation, but through deliberate action, through the subtle orchestration of experiences that reminded them both of boundaries and respect. Later that evening, back at the house, my daughter tried to make dinner. She moved with more care than before, reading instructions carefully, checking timers, and adjusting the oven with precision. I watched from the doorway, silently observing the subtle transformation. Her husband assisted, asking questions and following her lead, learning to navigate the space not as intruders but as guests in a house that demanded attention. I get it now, Dad, she said finally, her voice soft, almost reverent. I shouldn't have tried to exclude you. This house, you, it's not just a place. It's a part of everything you've built, and I ignored it. I took a deep breath, the warmth of the evening breeze brushing my face. Acknowledgement is everything. You don't get to skip steps and expect the foundation to hold. You didn't mean to hurt me, but you did. And now you see why presence, respect, and awareness matter. For the first time since their arrival, the atmosphere felt lighter, infused with understanding rather than tension. I knew the honeymoon would continue, but the dynamic had shifted. She was learning, and I was reminding her, not through anger, but through quiet authority, that family is not just about moments of joy, but about the care, attention, and acknowledgement that hold it together. That night, I stood on the balcony long after they went inside, listening to the waves crashing against the shore. The salty wind stung my eyes, the stars above sharp and cold, the ocean's rhythm steady and eternal. I realized this wasn't about punishment or revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming presence, asserting quiet authority, and teaching a lesson that wouldn't be forgotten. As I sipped my bourbon, the warmth seeping through me, I understood the truth. You don't need confrontation to make a point. Sometimes presence, preparation, and patience speak louder than words ever could. And tonight, the house, the ocean, and I had spoken clearly. The morning came soft and golden, sunlight spilling across the sand and reflecting off the windows of the house. I was already awake, moving quietly through the living room, savoring the calm before the day fully began. The ocean called from the balcony, waves rolling in steady, relentless rhythm, and I let the sound anchor me. My daughter and her husband were still asleep, but I could feel the shift in the air. The subtle tension of yesterday had softened, replaced by something tentative, expectant. By mid-morning, my daughter emerged from the guest wing, hair still tangled from sleep, barefoot on the cool floors. She looked at me, a small, cautious smile breaking across her face. Dad, I want to try something today. Just us. No schedules, no rules, just the house, the beach, and us. I studied her carefully. This wasn't a simple gesture. It was an olive branch, a test in itself. All right, I said slowly, but remember, the house has its rhythm, the beach has its rhythm, and people, they have their rhythm too. Step lightly, pay attention, and you'll be fine. We walked to the dunes behind the house, the sand shifting beneath our feet, the ocean breeze tangling our clothes and hair. She moved with care, glancing at me occasionally, as if seeking approval without needing to ask outright. I let her take the lead, observing quietly. She laughed when a wave crashed against her feet, wetting her toes, and I allowed myself to smile too. A soft, unguarded smile that hadn't appeared in days. When we reached a quiet stretch of beach, I stopped and looked at her. "Do you see why this matters?" I asked. "This place, it's not just sand, water, or walls. It's effort, attention, care. It's everything you don't notice until it's ignored." She nodded slowly, the wind tugging at her hair, eyes bright. "I see it now. I didn't mean to push you out, but I understand why you had to remind me. It's more than a house. It's a part of you, of us." Her words hit me harder than any confrontation could have. I felt a rush of emotions, pride, relief, and a subtle ache for the time lost, for the wedding I hadn't attended, for the invisible distance that had grown between us over the years. But this moment, right here, felt like the bridge beginning to rebuild. We spent hours on the beach collecting driftwood, tracing shapes in the sand, and simply being present with each other. No schedules, no timers, no hidden lessons. Just the sound of the waves, the warmth of the sun, the taste of salt on our lips. I watched her husband from a distance, letting him give space, but I noticed him observing carefully, learning without words, absorbing the rhythm of the house and the beach in his own way. By late afternoon, we returned to the house. I showed her a small hidden spot in the garden where I had planted flowers years ago, ones that bloomed only in the late summer sun. She knelt down, touching the petals lightly, eyes soft. "You kept all this for us?" she whispered. "For you," I corrected gently. "For us. For everyone who comes here and respects it. That's the difference. Presence matters. Respect matters. Attention matters. That's what this house teaches. That's what life teaches." Dinner that evening was different. She cooked, carefully following instructions, but with newfound confidence and ease. Her husband assisted, but the dynamic was no longer tense or defensive. It was cooperative, respectful, infused with acknowledgement. I sat back, tasting the food, tasting the change in the air, the subtle shift from conflict to understanding. Later, as night fell and the stars scattered across the sky, she approached me quietly, standing just outside the sliding doors. "Dad, thank you. Not just for the house, but for showing me, for reminding me. I needed this, more than I realized." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Sometimes, the lessons that sting the most are the ones we remember forever. "I didn't want to punish you. I wanted to be seen, and to make sure you see the value of presence and care." She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, and leaned briefly against me. That simple touch, that acknowledgement, carried more weight than any argument, any storm of anger, any confrontation. It was the bridge finally forming, the connection re-established, quietly but firmly. I sat on the balcony long after they went inside, listening to the ocean, tasting the salt in the air, feeling the cool breeze on my skin. I realized something profound. The battle wasn't about control or revenge, or even absence. It was about presence, and it was about being remembered, not just as a father who gives, but as a man whose efforts, care, and boundaries demanded acknowledgement. And tonight, for the first time since the wedding, I felt truly present, fully grounded, and quietly victorious. The storm had passed, leaving a calm that tasted like salt, sun, and the unshakable rhythm of the ocean. The next morning, I woke to a sky streaked with gray, clouds rolling in faster than I'd expected. The air smelled different, heavy, charged, like the calm before a storm. I brewed my coffee slowly, inhaling the aroma, letting it anchor me. Something in the house felt off. I couldn't see it yet, but I could sense it. The subtle shift in energy, the way shadows moved differently across the floors. Downstairs, my daughter and her husband were already up, voices muffled but tense. I caught snippets as I descended the stairs. "I don't know why the pool pump is acting up again," her husband muttered, frustration in his tone. "It was working fine yesterday." My daughter's voice was quieter, hesitant. "Maybe Dad changed the schedule. He likes to control everything. I didn't interrupt. Let them discover the surprise. Part of presence is observation, watching how people respond when they face unpredictability. I made my way to the kitchen, set out breakfast, and let them navigate the minor chaos I had quietly prepared. The coffee maker sputtered at an unusual interval. The oven beeped unexpectedly, and the pool timer triggered a jet of water that startled them both. Her husband groaned. "Seriously, it's like a maze in here." I appeared casually in the doorway, sipping my coffee. Life can feel like a maze when you ignore rhythm and attention. Rules aren't punishment, they're guidance. Even in chaos, presence and awareness keep you steady. They exchanged glances, frustration evident, but beneath it, I sensed growing respect. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about understanding the consequences of ignoring structure and the importance of noticing what's around you. By mid-morning, the storm arrived. Rain battered the windows, wind howled through the trees, and the ocean churned dark and restless. My daughter glanced outside, anxiety tightening her features. "Dad, what about the deck? The wind?" I led them to the safe interior spaces, showing how to secure chairs, lock windows, and maintain calm while the storm passed. I explained each step, not condescending but deliberate, letting them feel competence grow under guidance. Presence, I reminded them, isn't just about showing up. It's about noticing, preparing, and acting with care. Hours passed, and the storm intensified. The wind ripped through the beach, rain soaked the sands, and waves lashed against the rocks. They followed my instructions, carefully moving furniture, securing fragile items, and navigating puddles and slippery floors. Their cooperation was real now. The earlier tension transformed into teamwork. By afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving a wet, glistening beach and a house that had weathered the chaos intact. My daughter looked at me, exhaustion and admiration in her eyes. "Dad, I get it now. I see why this house, and everything you do, is more than just walls and rules. It's life lessons." Her husband nodded. "We underestimated this place. And you. It's more than just a vacation spot. It's perspective." I felt a quiet pride, the warmth in my chest that comes from knowing a lesson has been absorbed. The storm had been more than weather. It had been a metaphor, a natural test of respect, attention, and presence, and they had passed it, together. That evening, as the sun broke through the clouds and reflected off the wet sand, we stepped onto the beach again. The wind was calm, the ocean gentle, and for a moment it felt like the world had reset. My daughter laughed, splashing water at her husband, and I joined quietly, letting their joy fill the space without intruding. I didn't need to dominate anymore. They were learning, observing, and respecting on their own. Later, back inside, dinner was warm and relaxed. No alarms, no surprises, no subtle tests, just shared food, laughter, and conversation. I watched them interact, noting the small gestures of respect, her husband handing her a plate, her pausing to read the instructions carefully. The unspoken acknowledgement that this house demanded care. As night fell, I sat on the balcony, the ocean calm beneath the moonlight. I felt a sense of quiet triumph. The storm had been a test, one they hadn't expected, and yet they had learned, adapted, and grown. Respect, awareness, and presence weren't just lessons. They were now real, alive, and shared. And for the first time since their arrival, I allowed myself to fully relax, savoring the salty breeze, the rhythmic whisper of waves, and the knowledge that the bond with my daughter had grown stronger, tempered by challenge, and finally rooted in mutual understanding. The morning after the storm was crisp and bright. The ocean sparkled under the sun, reflecting a clarity that hadn't been there before. I stepped onto the balcony with my coffee, inhaling the sharp, salty air, feeling the lingering wetness from the previous night's rain. Everything smelled clean, renewed, like the house itself had exhaled and settled back into its rhythm. Inside, my daughter was bustling with energy, but not the anxious energy from the previous days. This was confidence. Confidence born from understanding, from paying attention, from navigating the house and its rules without fear. She was laughing with her husband as they rearranged the living room furniture for a better view of the ocean, carefully aligning everything so the sun hit just right. I watched silently, savoring the transformation. When she noticed me on the balcony, she called out, "Dad, come help us with this. I think the couch is blocking the light." I chuckled and joined them, stepping lightly across the floor, feeling the soft rug beneath my feet, the warmth of the morning sun on my shoulders. Her husband hesitated, but then followed, smiling. There was a rhythm to their movements now, an understanding that this house wasn't a playground. It was a space that demanded attention, respect, and awareness. As we worked, my daughter paused and looked at me, her expression soft. "Dad, thank you. Not just for the house, but for everything. For showing me how to be aware, to respect, and to notice. I didn't get it before." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You're learning. That's all any of us can do. Learn. Life, like this house, requires presence. And presence requires care. You've seen that now." We spent the morning outside, walking along the beach, collecting shells, and laughing when the waves knocked our feet off balance. It was effortless now, a flow that had been missing at the start of their honeymoon. The lessons had been absorbed, the tension melted away, and for the first time, I felt proud without bitterness. Back inside, I noticed her husband placing a small vase of flowers on the dining table. He looked at me, a small, genuine smile on his face. "We wanted to do this as a thank you, for letting us stay here, for showing us everything. This place, it's more than a house. It's a perspective." I nodded quietly, touched by the gesture. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about respect, acknowledgement, and the quiet triumph of presence. That evening, the three of us gathered on the deck to watch the sunset. The sky blazed in oranges, pinks, and purples, the ocean calm beneath the last light of day. My daughter leaned against me, her head brushing my shoulder, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "I won't forget this, Dad. I promise. Not just the house, but you." The words were simple, but they carried everything. The apology, the understanding, the acknowledgement of effort and presence. I placed my hand on hers, feeling the warmth, the weight of unspoken reconciliation. "That's all I ever wanted," I said quietly. "For you to see, to understand, and to remember. That's enough." As darkness fell, I stayed on the balcony long after they went inside, sipping my bourbon and listening to the ocean's steady whisper. I realized that the true victory wasn't in enforcing rules or orchestrating small trials. It was in the restoration of connection, in the acknowledgement of presence, in the subtle but powerful reclaiming of the bond between father and daughter. The house was quiet now, peaceful. The storm had passed, both outside and within. I smiled softly, letting the warm night air wash over me. Presence, respect, attention, those weren't just lessons for my daughter. They were lessons for me, too. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a profound calm, a quiet satisfaction, and the unshakable knowledge that some things, like love, family, and acknowledgement, couldn't be erased no matter how hard someone tried. The morning after the sunset felt unusually quiet. The house seemed to breathe, the floorboards creaking gently underfoot, the ocean whispering a steady rhythm against the shore. I moved through the rooms, taking mental notes, small imperfections here and there, but for the first time, none of it annoyed me. The house had become more than a structure. It had become a symbol of patience, effort, and connection. My daughter appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a notebook and pencil. "Dad, I was thinking we could document the house, all its quirks, the little things you've taught me. That way, if we come back, or if we have kids, it'll be preserved." Her eyes glinted with enthusiasm, but there was humility too, a willingness to learn. I smiled quietly. "That's a good idea, and you'll see that even the smallest details matter. Attention is everything." They spent the morning walking through every room, noting the placement of furniture, the subtle timing of lights and appliances, even the smell of the salt air when you opened the windows at a certain hour. Her husband followed along, intrigued and attentive, occasionally jotting down notes of his own. I watched them, a quiet satisfaction swelling in my chest. For the first time, they weren't just guests. They were participants, co-creators in the rhythm of the house. By late afternoon, I suggested a small challenge, a scavenger hunt around the property, designed to test attention and observation, but framed as a fun game. My daughter's eyes lit up with excitement. "You're evil, Dad," she laughed, but the tone was affectionate, not accusatory. The game began with small puzzles hidden in the garden, clues tucked under flower pots, patterns in the sand, and even timed instructions for moving between locations. Her husband groaned playfully, but he followed along, and soon they were both laughing, competing, noticing every detail of the house and grounds. I stayed back, observing silently, letting them experience the joy of presence firsthand. When they finally reached the last clue, a small note tucked inside a seashell on the shore, they looked at me together. "You did all this?" she asked, half incredulous, half impressed. I nodded, warmth in my chest. "Yes, to show you what attention and presence can reveal. The house, the beach, life itself. Nothing is accidental if you notice it." Her husband smiled, clearly impressed. "I get it now. The house isn't just a place. It's a teacher." By evening, we gathered on the deck, the air heavy with the scent of salt and flowers, the last rays of sunlight glinting off the waves. My daughter leaned against me again, softer this time, more comfortable in the connection we had rebuilt. "Dad, thank you. For the house, the lessons, everything. I get it now. I really do." I reached over, placing a hand over hers. "That's all I wanted. For you to see, to understand, and to carry it with you." Later, after they went inside, I stayed on the balcony, watching the moonlight dance on the ocean. I realized the truth, the storm, the challenges, the subtle frustrations. It hadn't been punishment, it had been guidance, a quiet assertion of presence that finally sank in. My daughter had learned to notice, to respect, to acknowledge, and in doing so, she had reminded me of something equally important. Patience, persistence, and quiet authority can achieve more than confrontation ever could. The night air was warm against my skin, the stars sharp and clear above. I sipped my bourbon, letting the flavor linger, tasting both salt and victory. The house was silent now, but alive in a different way. Alive with understanding, respect, and a bond that had survived absence, tension, and oversight. For the first time since the wedding, I felt completely at peace. Not because the house was perfect, or the rules had been followed flawlessly, but because presence had been restored, boundaries acknowledged, and love reaffirmed. The bridge between father and daughter had been rebuilt, strong, subtle, and unshakable. The next morning arrived with a crisp breeze that carried the smell of the ocean deeper into the house. I moved quietly through the rooms, noting small imperfections that had emerged overnight. A chair slightly out of place, a towel draped carelessly, but instead of irritation, I felt anticipation. Today would be a test of subtlety, a final reminder that awareness, presence, and attention were not optional. Downstairs, my daughter and her husband were already awake. She looked at me, her expression playful but determined. "Dad, I think we're ready for the final challenge," she said. "Something big, something unpredictable." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Unpredictable can be good," I said. "But remember, unpredictability requires observation. If you miss it, you'll learn the hard way." I spent the morning quietly orchestrating a series of small obstacles throughout the house and garden. Timers on the lights, hidden reminders, subtle rearrangements that required attention to detail, all designed not to frustrate, but to make them notice, to make them move deliberately. Every shift in the environment was a reminder of presence, of thought, of acknowledgement. When they discovered the first clue, a note tucked inside a kitchen drawer, they laughed, but quickly realized each step required careful observation. The scavenger hunt spanned the garden, the living room, and even the balcony, each clue testing attention to detail and awareness of the environment. I watched from a distance, savoring their reactions, the subtle glances they exchanged, the teamwork that had grown between them. Her husband finally stopped at one of the clues, eyes wide. "Okay, Dad, this is impressive. I didn't think the house could be this alive." "It's always been alive," I said quietly, stepping closer. "You just have to pay attention." By mid-afternoon, they reached the final clue, a small, weathered box buried near the dunes, containing a simple note. Presence matters. Awareness is power. Respect is everything. My daughter held it delicately, eyes meeting mine, understanding flashing in her gaze. I get it now, she said softly. Everything. The house, the lessons, the rules. It wasn't about control. It was about being present, about noticing, about care. Her husband nodded, a smile breaking across his face. I've learned more than I expected. About attention, respect, and patience. And about you, Dad. You're not just a housekeeper. You're a teacher. That evening, we sat together on the deck, the sun lowering behind the horizon, the waves whispering steadily against the shore. My daughter leaned against me, a soft smile on her face. I won't forget this, Dad. I promise. Not just the house, but everything you showed me. I reached over and took her hand gently, the warmth grounding me. That's all I ever wanted, for you to see, to understand, and to carry it with you. The house, the lessons, they're only meaningful if you remember them. Later, as darkness settled over the beach, I remained on the balcony, listening to the ocean, tasting the salt in the air, feeling the quiet victory that came not from confrontation, but from presence, patience, and subtle guidance. The house was no longer just a structure. It was a living testament to effort, attention, and respect, and my daughter had finally acknowledged that. For the first time since the wedding, I felt completely at peace. Not because the rules were followed perfectly, not because the house was flawless, but because presence had been restored, boundaries had been recognized, and love had been reaffirmed. The bridge between father and daughter was stronger than ever, built on understanding, respect, and unshakable connection. The next morning, I woke to the soft hum of the ocean and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. The house was unusually quiet, but I could feel the anticipation in the air. My daughter had taken to moving through the rooms with care, her steps deliberate, eyes scanning details she might have missed before. Even her husband moved with a subtle attentiveness I hadn't seen at the start of the honeymoon. I joined them in the kitchen where she was arranging breakfast. "Dad, we've been talking," she said softly, a seriousness in her tone that immediately caught my attention. "We want to make the rest of this honeymoon meaningful, not just for us, but for you too." I nodded slowly, intrigued. "Go on," she smiled faintly. "We want to help around the house, participate in the routines, follow the rhythm, not because we have to, but because we want to. We understand now." I felt a surge of pride. This was no longer a challenge, no longer a lesson imposed. It was acknowledgement, voluntary and heartfelt. "That's good," I said quietly. "Presence isn't just about noticing, it's about choosing to be involved." We spent the morning together walking the beach, gathering driftwood, arranging small decorative touches around the house, and noting tiny adjustments that made everything feel alive. My daughter laughed freely, her earlier tension replaced by a confident ease. Her husband assisted thoughtfully, and I watched them both, the quiet rhythm of the house flowing through their actions. After lunch, I suggested one final activity, a memory wall. I handed them a stack of old photographs, notes, and mementos I had kept over the years, things from birthdays, graduations, and countless small moments. "Place these where you see fit," I said. "Make it your memory of this house and this time." My daughter paused, holding a photograph of us on this very beach years ago. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Dad, I didn't realize how much history lives here, and how much of it you've carried for us." Her husband placed a photo of their wedding on the wall, and together they began arranging the memories thoughtfully. Each placement, each choice, reflected acknowledgement, care, and presence. I observed quietly, feeling a quiet warmth grow in my chest. By evening, the wall was complete. Photos, notes, and keepsakes filled the space, a testament to years of love, effort, and attention. My daughter stood back, looking at it, then at me. "Thank you, Dad, for showing us, for reminding us what presence means. I see it now, in the house, in you, in life." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. All I ever wanted was for you to notice, to understand, and to carry it forward. Later that night, I sat on the balcony alone, watching the moonlight shimmer across the water. The house was quiet, the waves steady and rhythmic. For the first time since the wedding, I felt completely at peace. The lessons had been absorbed, the boundaries respected, and the bridge between father and daughter fully restored. I sipped my bourbon, the warmth grounding me, and reflected on the journey. The initial absence, the tension, the subtle challenges. They hadn't been punishment, they had been guidance. And the payoff wasn't just in acknowledgement, it was in growth, understanding, and restored connection. As the night deepened and the stars spread across the sky, I realized something profound. Presence, respect, and awareness aren't just about rules or houses. They're about life, relationships, and love. And tonight, in the quiet glow of moonlight and memory, I knew the bond with my daughter was unshakable, built on acknowledgement, effort, and unspoken understanding. The house, the ocean, and I had spoken clearly, and this time, everyone had truly listened. The morning arrived soft and golden, the ocean glittering like shards of glass under the early sun. The house was calm, the air filled with the faint smell of salt and flowers from the garden. I moved through the rooms, noticing the small adjustments my daughter and her husband had made overnight. The towels neatly folded, chairs aligned perfectly, even the coffee maker left in its precise place. I smiled quietly to myself. Presence had been absorbed. Respect had been understood. The subtle victories of the past week had transformed into a rhythm that no longer needed enforcement. It was felt, not imposed. Downstairs, my daughter was already busy arranging breakfast. "Dad, we thought you should eat with us today," she said, her voice soft but confident. "It's part of the routine, part of the acknowledgement. We want you here, part of this." I felt warmth rise in my chest. For the first time in days, she wasn't just observing, she was participating willingly. "I'll join you," I said, my voice steady, filled with quiet pride. Over breakfast, we talked more than we had in weeks. Conversations flowed freely, laughter punctuating the air, the unspoken tension of the earlier days replaced by connection. Her husband contributed thoughtfully, asking questions about the house, the ocean, and even small family memories I had long kept tucked away. It was a dialogue now, not a series of lessons or subtle tests. Later in the morning, I suggested a final walk along the dunes. The sun was warm, the sand soft beneath our feet, and the ocean stretched infinitely before us. My daughter walked beside me, occasionally glancing at the water, occasionally at me, silently acknowledging the bond we had rebuilt. We stopped at a small cluster of driftwood logs where we had spent time earlier in the week. She knelt, picking up a shell, turning it thoughtfully in her hands. "Dad, I didn't realize how much care goes into everything," she said quietly. "The house, the routines, even the smallest details. It's everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "It's all about attention, presence, respect. Once you see it, it changes how you move through life." Her husband stood behind her, arms crossed, nodding slowly. "I get it now. I've learned more than I expected. Not just about the house, about presence, awareness, and paying attention to what matters." By afternoon, we returned to the house. My daughter suggested one last gesture, a small toast on the deck. We raised our glasses to presence, to attention, to respect, and most importantly, to family. She smiled at me, her eyes glinting with affection and understanding. "Dad, thank you for showing me the way, and for never letting me forget you were here." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "You don't need to thank me," I said softly. "Just carry it with you. That's enough." As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the ocean reflecting streaks of orange and pink, I watched them quietly. The house was no longer a battlefield, nor a stage for subtle lessons. It was a living testament to attention, care, and acknowledgement. My presence had been restored, my authority quietly asserted, and the bond with my daughter stronger than ever. Later that night, I sat on the balcony alone, listening to the ocean whisper against the shore. The wind carried a faint warmth, the air smelled of salt and flowers, and the house behind me hummed with quiet life. I sipped my bourbon, savoring the taste and the moment. The storm had passed, the challenges had been met, and the lesson had been learned. Presence, respect, and acknowledgement. Simple, unyielding, powerful. I smiled softly, knowing that this house, this time, and this bond would remain unshakable. The honeymoon had ended, but the connection we rebuilt would last far longer than any trip, any rule, or any lesson. It was permanent, quiet, and real. The kind of triumph that doesn't need applause. The morning after the toast, I woke early as usual, with the house bathed in soft sunlight. The waves lapped gently at the shore, a steady rhythm that mirrored my thoughts. The past week had been exhausting, challenging, and emotionally charged, but also transformative. I moved through the rooms, noticing the subtle marks of my daughter and her husband. A chair slightly adjusted, a towel neatly folded, the coffee maker in its precise place. Every small detail was proof of attention, respect, and acknowledgement. I brewed my coffee and stepped onto the balcony, inhaling deeply. The salt air filled my lungs, sharp and invigorating, and I let the quiet calm of the ocean settle into me. I reflected on the journey of the past days, how absence had created tension, how subtle challenges had forced awareness, and how presence, when asserted with care, could reclaim both space and respect. My daughter appeared, holding 2 cups of coffee, her movements deliberate but relaxed. "I wanted to bring this up here," she said, handing me a cup. "I think I finally understand what you were trying to show me. Not just about the house, but about life, about attention, about respect." I nodded, taking a sip and letting the warmth seep into me. "Presence isn't something you just talk about," I said quietly. "It's something you show. It's something you maintain. And once it's acknowledged, it becomes permanent." She sat beside me, the breeze tangling her hair across her face. "I didn't mean to shut you out at the wedding. I thought we could handle things on our own, but I see now that some things you can't bypass. Presence matters." Her words struck me deeply. This wasn't just acknowledgement, it was understanding. She had internalized the lessons, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of exclusion lifted. I placed a hand over hers, feeling the warmth, the connection, and the quiet triumph that didn't need words. Her husband joined us, standing slightly behind, watching the waves, a subtle smile on his face. "I think I learned the most about awareness," he said. "Not just about the house or the rules, but about how important it is to notice what's there before it's gone." "You've shown us both that, Dad." I nodded silently. The validation wasn't about control. It was about understanding, respect, and recognition. Presence had been reasserted not through anger, not through confrontation, but through subtle guidance and careful orchestration. And now, it had taken root, permanent and unshakable. We spent the morning walking along the beach, collecting driftwood and shells, arranging them thoughtfully near the deck. My daughter laughed freely, her earlier tension replaced by ease, confidence, and appreciation. Her husband worked alongside her, careful, deliberate, and respectful of both the house and the lessons learned. By noon, I realized something important. The house wasn't just a home, it was a living teacher, a reflection of effort, attention, and love. And I, as the father, was a living testament to the same principles. Absence, tension, and subtle challenges had all served a purpose. And now, after the storm, after the tests, and after acknowledgement, presence had been fully restored, not just in the house, but in our family. As we returned to the house, I felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that doesn't need applause. The lessons had been absorbed, respect had been earned. The bond between father and daughter, and between us all, was stronger than ever. That night, I sat on the balcony alone, sipping my bourbon, watching the moonlight dance across the ocean. The house behind me hummed softly, a living reminder of attention, care, and presence. I realized that the journey hadn't been about punishment or revenge. It had been about reclamation, restoration, and subtle, unshakable triumph. And as I breathed in the salty air, I knew the truth. Presence, once claimed and acknowledged, lasts far longer than any absence, argument, or oversight. It endures, quietly, powerfully, permanently. The morning was calm, the ocean a mirror of the sky above, and the house seemed to breathe in rhythm with the waves. I moved through the rooms quietly, savoring the stillness, noticing the subtle ways my daughter and her husband had left the space. A chair slightly angled, the towels folded neatly, even a small seashell placed on the windowsill. It was proof of attention, respect, and acknowledgement. Quiet but powerful. Downstairs, my daughter greeted me with a soft smile, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Dad, I just wanted to say thank you again. Not just for the house, but for everything. I understand now, all of it." I took the cup, feeling the warmth seep into my hands, and nodded. Understanding comes from presence, from noticing, and from effort. You've done both, and that makes all the difference. Her husband appeared behind her, arms crossed casually but with a subtle, respectful nod. "I've seen the difference too," he said. "It's not just about rules or routines, it's about attention, awareness, and acknowledging what matters." We walked outside together, the sand cool beneath our feet, the waves rolling steadily against the shore. My daughter paused to pick up a small driftwood piece, turning it thoughtfully in her hands. "Dad, this week I've realized that respect isn't just a word. It's action, it's attention, it's presence. I won't forget it." I placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the warmth and sincerity in her words. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to see, to understand, and to carry it with you." The house, the lessons, they're permanent if you remember them. We spent the morning together arranging small touches around the house, flowers, shells, photographs, everything in a way that reflected care, attention, and shared presence. Her husband followed along, engaged and observant, the tension from earlier days now completely gone. The atmosphere was relaxed, collaborative, and full of quiet joy. By late afternoon, I suggested a final walk to the dunes, the spot where so many lessons had been reinforced. The sun was low, golden, casting long shadows across the sand. My daughter walked beside me, relaxed and confident. She looked at me, eyes bright. "Dad, this place, this week, it's changed the way I see things. You, life, respect, presence, everything." Her husband smiled, quietly agreeing. "It's been more than a honeymoon. It's been a lesson I'll never forget." We stood together at the top of the dune, watching the sun dip into the ocean. The waves whispered against the shore, steady and eternal. My daughter leaned against me briefly, a gesture of acknowledgement, trust, and reconciliation. I placed a hand over hers, feeling the quiet triumph of presence restored, boundaries respected, and love reaffirmed. Later that night, I sat alone on the balcony, the stars sharp above, the ocean reflecting silver in the moonlight. I sipped my bourbon slowly, savoring the taste and the moment. The house was quiet but alive in a different way, alive with understanding, respect, and the subtle but undeniable presence I had reclaimed. The honeymoon had ended, but the lessons, the bond, and the acknowledgement would endure. Presence, once claimed and respected, was permanent. Attention, care, and respect, the things I had fought quietly to assert, were no longer lessons. They were lived, remembered, and felt. And as the waves whispered against the shore, I smiled softly, knowing that this chapter had closed not with confrontation or anger, but with quiet triumph, restored connection, and unshakable presence. The morning after their last full day in the house was quiet, almost reverent. The sun had just begun to touch the waves, making the ocean shimmer like a field of silver. I walked through the rooms slowly, noting the faint traces of life left behind. The chairs perfectly aligned, the towels folded just so, a seashell on the windowsill. Everything spoke of attention, care, and acknowledgement. Presence had been understood, and the subtle triumph I had sought was evident in every detail. My daughter emerged from the guest wing, hair messy but eyes bright, holding 2 cups of coffee. She smiled softly. "Dad, can we sit outside? Just for a little while, before we leave?" I took the cup she handed me, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. "Of course," I said. We stepped onto the deck, the ocean breeze tangling our hair, the salt air sharp and clean. For a moment no words were spoken. We simply watched the waves, feeling the rhythm of the world around us and the quiet connection between us. Finally she spoke. "Dad, I've been thinking about everything this week. About the house, the rules, the lessons. I didn't get it at first, but now I see it. I understand what it means to pay attention, to respect, and to be present. I nodded quietly. That's all I ever wanted. Presence isn't just about being somewhere. It's about noticing, caring, and acknowledging. Once you carry it with you, it lasts. Permanently. Her husband joined us quietly, standing just behind, his gaze steady on the horizon. "I've learned more than I expected," he said. "Not just about the house, but about life, awareness, respect, noticing what matters. You've shown us both that, Dad." We sat together for a long time, letting the ocean and the breeze speak for us. The tension that had marked the first days of the honeymoon had vanished, replaced by understanding, respect, and a quiet sense of accomplishment. I realized then that the subtle challenges, the small frustrations, and the carefully orchestrated lessons hadn't been punishment, they had been guidance. And the results were evident: acknowledgement, growth, and connection. Later, my daughter leaned against me, her head brushing my shoulder. "I won't forget this week, Dad. Not the house, not the lessons, not you." I placed a hand over hers, feeling the warmth, the connection, and the quiet triumph that didn't need words. "You don't have to," I said softly. "That bond, it's permanent." We spent the remainder of the morning arranging the house for their departure, not out of obligation, but out of respect and care. Every chair, every towel, every small detail reflected the lessons learned and the acknowledgement earned. Presence had been restored, subtly, quietly, and completely. As they prepared to leave, my daughter turned to me one last time, eyes bright with understanding. "Thank you, Dad, for showing me, for reminding me. I see now, and I'll carry it with me." I smiled, feeling a rare, profound satisfaction. That's all I ever wanted. Presence, respect, awareness. Remember them. After they left, I stood on the balcony alone, the ocean stretching infinitely before me, moonlight glinting off the waves. I sipped my bourbon slowly, savoring the taste and the quiet sense of triumph. The house was silent but alive in a different way, alive with understanding, acknowledgement, and restored connection. The lesson was complete. The presence had been reasserted, and the bond between father and daughter, once strained, was stronger than ever, quiet, unshakable, and permanent. The house was quiet in the early morning, the ocean's steady rhythm filling the space with a soft, calming pulse. I moved through the rooms one last time, taking in the faint marks of life they had left behind. A towel folded just so, a seashell on the windowsill, chairs aligned with care, all subtle but undeniable signs of presence, respect, and acknowledgement. I stepped onto the balcony, bourbon in hand, letting the salty breeze wash over me. The sun was rising over the horizon, casting a golden path across the water. For the first time since the wedding, I felt a deep, unshakable calm. The tension, the frustration, the absence, they were all behind me now. What remained was something permanent: presence, recognition, and the restored bond with my daughter. I thought back to the week, the initial shock of being left out, the subtle tests, the lessons embedded in every corner of the house. It hadn't been about control or revenge. It had been about reclaiming my place, quietly but deliberately, in her life and in the house I had built. And now, seeing the results, I felt a profound satisfaction. She had learned, acknowledged, and grown. I had been seen. The memory wall she had created during the scavenger hunt caught my eye. Photographs, notes, and keepsakes arranged thoughtfully, each piece a reflection of care, attention, and shared presence. It wasn't just a tribute to the house, it was a tribute to family, to connection, and to understanding. I took a deep breath, tasting the salt in the air, feeling the warmth of the sun on my shoulders, and realized that the subtle victories of the past week had become permanent. My daughter understood the importance of presence. My bond with her was restored, and my authority, quiet, patient, deliberate, had been respected without confrontation, without humiliation, without anger. Later, I walked down to the shore, letting the cool sand shift beneath my feet. I watched the waves roll in, steady and eternal, and felt the weight of the past weeks lift from my chest. This place, this house, this bond, it was a living testament to effort, care, and attention. And it was ours, permanently. As the sun climbed higher, I returned to the balcony. The house fully awake now, the morning alive with possibility. I sipped my bourbon slowly, savoring the warmth and the moment, reflecting on the quiet triumph I had achieved. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was complete. Presence had been reasserted, lessons had been learned, and love had been reaffirmed. I looked out at the ocean one last time, the horizon endless and unwavering, and I smiled softly. The story had closed, not with anger or conflict, but with acknowledgement, understanding, and quiet victory. My daughter had seen me. My presence had been honored, and the bond we shared was stronger than ever, unshakable and permanent. The house, the waves, and I stood together in quiet triumph, a testament to patience, respect, and the enduring power of presence. And in that moment, I knew, some victories don't need applause. They are felt, remembered, and lived.